Duke Ellington was from Washington, D.C. He went to Armstrong High School. If you know Washington, most well-off blacks went to Dunbar, but he went to Armstrong, which was a technical school. And then as he went to technical school, he developed skill as a sign painter. But he wanted to play music. And on weekends, he would often play musicals, he played Italian books and things like that. But he really wanted to go to New York. This man, Will Marion Cook, who was a classical composer, helped him go to New York. At the time, Ellington was playing at the True Reformer School. If you know U Street, you have the True Reformer, at I guess 11. And there, they play concerts at night. And then after the concert, they have basketball games right there, and at the Y. And games, and they would have something, the Harlem Wrens. The Harlem was the basketball team named after the Harlem Renaissance. And people play basketball, and then the band would come back in. That is the nature of what U Street was then. And Taylor did this. Now, in this mix comes cooking up, came a man named James Reese Europe. James Reese Europe, James Reese Europe, if I know you, ever his name? James Reese Europe was the man who born in Moechella, Alabama, came to D.C. when he was 10. He lived on the same street as John Philip Sousa on D Street, Southeast. John Philip Sousa from the man who invented march music in America side. So there, and John Philip Sousa brings these kids, lets these kids come listen to the music. James Reese Europe's father died when he was young. He drops out of school. He goes to New York. But as he goes to New York, he gets involved with playing music. And there he meets somebody named Irene Castle. And Irene Castle, if you know, they were dancers. They were dancers. She and her husband were ballroom dancers. He started playing with them. But because he had been in D.C., he had seen big bands and things play, he formed a band of 125 members. Now, think about the size of that. 10 basses, 10. You know, anybody know the difference between a band and an orchestra? Theoretically, the difference is that orchestra has string instruments, violin, the band, this stuff. But he created this. Now, out of this, he created something called the Clef Club. And the Clef Club became the first organization of musicians, period. Became a union of musicians, because blacks had no representative. He took this name, Clef Club, because, bass player. But he took it from a group at Howard University called the Treble Clef Club. And little did he know, the Treble Clef Club was a group of aristocratic black women at Howard who would not listen to jazz at all. And Howard was the headquarters of black culture and thought, especially in Harlem, refused to have any jazz there until maybe 1950. Well, he is a member of this cadet corps, and all black schools have this cadet corps. And out of the cadet corps came the first black generals. General Benjamin O. Davis, General Benjamin O. Davis Jr. These were the great leaders, one in World War I and World War II, when there were no black generals. I'm sorry. He said two fingers. Oh. He said two fingers. Now, so here's James Reese Europe. He goes up to New York. Now, what happens then? He works with the castles, but then World War I comes. In World War I, he goes off and creates something called the 369th Regiment Military Band. They're these military bands. Understand in World War I, blacks weren't allowed to fight. They had to fight for the right to fight. They weren't given guns at first. They were just going to make his distance. But he goes over here, and he works with his unit. And his unit, 369th, the Harlem Hellfighters, becomes the only unit in the First War that doesn't lose any soldiers. Now they call it also the Enfant Perdu, the lost children. And he plays there, and he's playing music, he's an organizer because he's a regimental leader. Now, I should have told you that military had a lot to do with African American development of jazz. Why? Because after the Revolutionary War and after the Civil War, when soldiers left, the soldier goes to battle, what kind of instruments do they have, generally? There are probably three instruments that you know they all will have, right? Bugle. What else? Drum. And a piccolo. And they would have those. And so when these instruments were left behind in the fields, blacks picked them up. So it's a natural. And military, what does military music have to do with this? A lot. In New Orleans, you look at the three trends in New Orleans music. You hear the African music that Louis Armstrong, in a way, picked up on. You've read about Louis Armstrong back there. I'll come back to that. The Creole music and the march music. African Louis Armstrong, Creole Ferdinand and Angela Morgan, and the French military. Boom, boom. And so they pick up on this. He goes and forms his regimental band, goes to Europe. As he's in Europe, they fight, and then they're asked by the commanders to play music. They start playing music. And one day they're playing this song. They're playing this song after the French won at the Battle of Armand, outside of France, with a lot of black soldiers in Paris. And then he's playing this song. All of a sudden, the French look up. They don't know what it is. And he's put the Marseillaise to jazz. And jazz stayed in France ever since then. He becomes such a known figure. And because he's also fighting with French colonial unions. Mali, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. And all of these, and they join together. So he developed this sort of anti-imperialist notion. Because the French, the French soldiers, developing the Pan-African movement and uniting. So he goes there, he comes back. He comes back to America, and as he comes back, his unit goes to up New York and they dance. But the black military units from Washington are not allowed to parade because of the segregation of the city. The city is very segregated by them. It was always segregated. And he comes in. Then he tragically is killed one night by a deranged bandit. He's buried in Arlington Cemetery there. In the midst of all this, of this man who we know as Duke. It's exaggerated. You know, they always say Duke because he was from a very upscale background. It's not quite true. Duke Ellington's father was a porter. Porter's a good job, but it's not like it was a... And his mother, Daisy, never worked because the father worked for... He was a porter of a man who lived over in DuPont Circle, Farragut Heights, which is the biggest area, well, getting nice things there. And he worked there, very lively. And Duke took the name because his mother treated him as if he was royalty. He doesn't study piano, he doesn't take it seriously. But at about 12 or 13, he starts. He becomes a sign painter to make a living. He's painting by mistress. And his painting science, he gets a scholarship at Pratt Institute. But he decides he doesn't want to go. He wants to stay and form this group called the Washingtonians. And he plays there and starts playing jazz all up and down the street. Becomes a master for that there. As he's playing, the other influences come. One was a man named Samuel Coolidge Taylor. Samuel Coolidge Taylor was part Nigerian, part English. Started creating something called the Ethiopian pageant. He comes and brings great pageants to Washington, D.C. James Richelieu had played with him. And Duke Ellington sees this, and he sees the role of music in society. So he starts playing in society, starts playing all these places. Duke Ellington, like most musicians, does not stay in Washington. He goes to New York. We were in the session before. Generally, if you're a great musician, you do go to New York. And he played it. Now, at the same time, he starts bringing big band music to all these places and dances on the weekends, especially at U Street. I don't understand this. And he starts going up and down U Street. At U Street, other people are coming. And one is called the great Jelly Roll Morton. He's at 12th and U Street at a place called Jungle Land. And the Jungle Land is a place, if you can imagine U Street, this is where people are going. White people that come from all these cabarets that are over there all night. Jelly Roll Morton, of course, the master of ragtime. By 1920s, out or so, ragtime is out. It's going out. Or stride, other forms are going out. Big band things coming in. He's not doing so good in his luck. He comes to Washington to make a place to try to play more music. And here you have the great Jelly Roll Morton, who comes to Washington. All these people have great influence. So Washington itself has what they call a Washington Renaissance. Now, some of you have heard of the Harlem Renaissance, which lasted maybe from 1917, the Great Migration until the Great Depression, pretty much. So it covers the Great Migration, it covers black radicalism. It covers the development of the communist movement in the Bolshevik Revolution, 1917. It covers the development of Pan-Africanism. This is African Americans from all over the world, Africans and African Americans from all over the world uniting against colonialism. It comes at the same time, and this concept of the new Negro. That's what the new Negro was the idea we would reject the old, we would create a new culture, new literature. And essentially in Washington, this place here is this is Andrew Lee Cooper. Andrew Lee Cooper is the first black woman to get a doctorate at Sorbonne. And her house is named 4th and T Street. It's a magnificent structure. Howard should have bought it years ago, but it didn't. And now, you know, somebody bought it and had a bed and breakfast. Well, the U Street and Howard, the Renaissance is coming, and jazz is coming with this. And great people. Kelly Miller Smith, Grace Ozarks, Langston Hughes, you all know of him. Alvin Rivers. At the same time, Washington is increasingly bifurcated, and music becomes so. You have groups like the Moso Lit. Anybody know what that means? Muso Lit. But you guess what it means? Musical, sociological, literary. But black folks like me made fun of it. So Muso Lit, but also means Moso Light. And if you look at all the people dancing, they're all very light skinned. You see this? Everybody across there, it's a light right now. Now, in the Moso Light Club, the men, it's the men's club, but the women come out once a year, something like that. They have these big packages. They have those. Then after this, they would go to the Bohemian Caravan, places like that. The music developed at other places. The Howard Theater. You all know the Howard Theater is right there. And right next to the Howard Theater, there's a great picture. One great day in Harlem. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it. But it had all the people, the little boys and the other people sitting out in the ground from Harlem. This is right before that great day in Harlem. And right next door is Frank's Pool Hall. It's now called Wright Proper. Wright Proper. And Wright Proper is there. One of my students, one of my former students now, took the building and converted it into a decent place. When I first came to DC many years ago, we'd go to Frank's Pool Hall right next there. And the Howard Theater became the theater before the Apollo Theater. But the great musical companies and things would come in. And this is where people like Drew Gallagher would come back and play and hear the groups, the hot spots, the rockin', the rhythm and blues groups, many of them. And some years later, Howard Theater was given money by the city to renovate. It did, but it just did not do well. It's poorly run, just poorly run. But now they've come back, and people like, anybody know Chuck Brown? Chuck Brown died, his funeral there, and many other things. At the same time, it's developing, the music is developing, these covenants are taking over. Housing covenant is just what it says. Nothing can be rented or used occupied by any person of Negro blood or any person of the Semitic race. So what does that mean? The blood or origin. Or any person named Armenians, Jews, Hebrews, Persians, or Syrians. It means no person. So people get confused about this, but there were housing companies all over the city, including for Jewish people. Even though rich Jewish developers sometimes own the property, they would not rent to poor Jewish people. And you have these covenants. The last covenant, one of the last covenants was Lyndon Johnson lived over in Forest Hill over going towards Wisconsin Avenue. He lived there, had a housing company in his house. He was a Southern, of course, but he was in some ways decent. And he got rid of the housing company in his house without anyone knowing. George Bush lived in Kennebunkport, Maine, up until about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. There were housing companies there. Anybody knows Kennebunkport, Maine, it's a very, very rich area. Anyway, there were these housing companies in D.C. So they also crossed to people in music, where there could be no place for blacks and whites to perform music together. Even as Washington City is growing, and you can see, these are just some numbers. You can see the black population as it grows. This is around Florida, not far that way. You see the population as it grows, Washington became a majority black city until about 1957. And 57 it became the first city, a small city with the majority black population. just think about the numbers. Like 57, majority, which means over 51%. 1970, you think maybe over 30%. What's this year, 2021, you know what the figures are? We don't know exactly, but last I saw, I was joking with someone because I'm going to teach in Belize for my university next. And last figures I saw, the city was a 42% black, 40% white. But then new census figures came out, and the numbers are these: 39.1% black, 39.1% white, 10% mixed, and 10% Hispanic. So you have that, so 39 was 78, 88, 90, 98%. Now, but if you think about the mixed race, you know, everybody who says they're mixed race does not necessarily assume that they take the race of the minority person. So a person could be a mixed race, black and white, maybe the person identifies as white. You never know. Person could be Asian. So this number is sort of skewed, but black Washington did a black man, and with it brought this particular culture. Now, at the same time, music coming, Duke Ellington is music is having a great role. Then the big event in Washington history to do with music has to do with 1939. And this woman, Mary Anderson, trained at the Clark Institute in Philadelphia. She's invited to Washington. Every year she's invited to Washington to sing. At Central High School, which is not Mendoza High School, which is at 13th and Clifton up there. And at one point, they don't have enough room to put it in there. Now remember, and people complain because Central High School is a white high school. And she's been able to sing, but now the whites are very upset. She needs a bigger place, so where do they want to go? They try to get Constitution Hall, which is, you know, Constitution Hall down 20 down by GW. At any rate, Constitution Hall was run by the Daughters of the American Revolution. The Daughters of the American Revolution was second. They were not least very constitutional. Now, DC is so warped at that time that you could sing at Constitution Hall, but you couldn't sit. I'm sorry, you could sit, you could perform it, you could sit at Constitution Hall, but you couldn't sing. At the National Theater, you could sing, but you couldn't sit. So those are discriminatory. So she's not allowed to sing. So what happens is one great lady saves the day. Her name is Eleanor Roosevelt. She comes in and rents the federal land. One reason now you have so many demonstrations, there's so many things there is because of this. Because the first public display was they have to have it out at the Lincoln Monument. And you see the great speech she sings, and she sings Ave Maria, she sings The Whole World Is in My Hands. It has a tremendous impact. Next year, Paul Robeson comes. And, sorry. I'm sure it is. And next year, Paul Robeson comes to perform that. Now, in the midst of this, clubs are developed. Segregated clubs. 50th and 8th Street Northeast, suburban part. In other places. Here, the club Crystal Cabbage, we were speaking about this the other day. Crystal Cabbage is what later on called Bohemian Cabbage. So some of you are taking rides and you're going out to Shenandoah and you go to this, what is this, stalactite, things like that. In Northeast 8th Street is a club called Club Kavakis, and it's owned by the Greek. They're always extremely segregated. Crystal Cabbage, if you look, all the women are very light skinned, it's very segregated. The bands can play, this is they come through the back door. This is the segregation of Washington, D.C. at that time. Billie Holiday comes right after Mary Anderson from Washington, and she comes from this place called Club Ballet. Now, Billie Holiday in 1939 has done something remarkable. She's issued a song called Strange Fruit. Strange Fruit at Cafe Society in New York. Strange Fruit is written by a man named Louis Allen. Louis Allen is a Jewish man, progressive from New York. He writes a song, Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood in the wings and blood in the root. Now, as Billie Holiday comes in, people are very upset because here she's come with this militant song. She played the club ballet, and this will be the scene. Because the notion of the Club Ballet, forgive the picture, but what is it? It's heathenizing of blacks. It's saying that exotic and people and notion of jungle fever. And so people want to come down and see black people as heathen dancing, naked things. But this was the, she comes to Club Ballet, and in Washington, D.C., some blacks are very upset. It's not New York, they're very upset because Washington has a very large elite black clientele. They're upset that she would come and bring this to Washington, this idea but she comes and she's very well received. In fact, the NAACP did not want, the National Association for Advancement of Colored People did not want her to come. Certainly Urban League did. And then she is such a performance of singing this song that some people want to give her up for the Spring Line Medal. Now something unique happens at this time too. These two men. Anybody ever heard of Atlantic Records? Atlantic Records? Okay, Atlantic Records is the record that produced the Rolling Stones. Here, Nestor and Ahmed Erdogan tells a story about one day he gets a record of these mop-head British boys. He said, this is not the throws it away, it's the Beatles. He has a chance to have the Beatles, he blows it. So the Rolling Stones come, he accepts them. And now, they come here from London. They go 12 and 13. As they come from London, they're Muslims. And they go to the church, and that's where the father's ambassador, they play music. And they're infatuated by music. Why? Because they lived in London. In London, you have the Royal Albert Theatre. The Royal Albert Theatre was a great music hall. And they would go there and play and hear Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, things. They come to Washington. They go to St. Albans School, but the father didn't like it because they have to pray. The father's name was Maurice Jackson. Maurice was the second ambassador under the Ottoman Empire. When Ottoman takes secular power in Turkey. And so the father had come after World War II, and they want to go out and hear this music. They're only 12 or 13. So they can go and they have this chauffeur named Cleo. Cleo takes them to all the nightclubs. These are the boys, because they're so invested, they just want to know what's happening. But they've always got this love of music. They've heard about it because their mother sang folk songs. And they've heard about the great people who played it. So the father says, no, you can't be doing this running all the time tonight. He sends them to Landon School, which is up the street. So as he sends them there, he says, bring the musicians into my house. And as the musicians come, and I mean the great Louis Armstrong, Me Love Blues, Jerry Moore, Ella Fitzgerald, Lena Horne, all the greats come. And the next door neighbor says, I'm sorry, you can't bring black people to the front door here. And so but my grandmother raised me, and I had to read the Bible to her every night. So I'm absolutely blessed that I knew the Bible. And there are verses, and he read a verse. Huh?
When you're ready to open up to questions, I was asked to give you that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And it's a great verse. In my father's house, there were many mansions. If it were not so, we would not have told you. He said, this is my mansion. And in my house, anyone can come through the front door. So these two men, these two Muslim men, have a great influence. And then they go up the street, the 16th and Orange Street. And what's the 16th and Orange Street? The Jewish Community Center. And they go to the concert. Now, I don't think the people at Jewish Community Center knew what was happening. They just was going to, they allowed the music to come. So they go there, and I say, dig this. Two Muslim guys go to a Jewish center playing black music. You could tell me today to show you what that was happening, and I bet you wouldn't find it. You just don't have that type of focus. I don't, at least not in my time. But they have such tremendous influence on integrating the city. Because for the first time, and then they're the first to have a concert at the National Press Club. Then they go and work with this guy, Waxman Maxey. Maxey Silverman is a dentist. He's a Jewish dentist. But he's tired of being a dentist. He's not like, who wants to help? Nobody, you know, and looks, if you look at it, tell you the truth, he looks like a star who used to be the Prime Minister of Syria. And he's there, and they start producing these records. They go to Maxey, and this opens the whole field of records up. And then they started bringing people. Now, I'll skip a little bit. You would think Louis Armstrong had a lot to do with civil rights and immigrating in Washington, D.C. It'd be fun. Why? When Little Rock comes, Eisenhower, the Russians are saying, what, Sputnik, we're going to rule the world. Eisenhower said there's only one person that I had to send him to Russia for them to tell. Nobody would believe anything I said. They don't believe one man is Louis Armstrong. It's true. Most popular. So, and Louis had been to Ghana and all these places. So I called Louis and said, Louis, you have to go to Russia and tell them what's happening in Louisville and Little Rock is not true. And you remember the pictures? If you're that young, people say, well, I don't remember that. Well, I remember the Civil War. I didn't live in the Civil War. I didn't live through Bach, so I know who it is. So when I say this, just imagine Little Rock, and you have these white bishops, including women. The first scene of women throwing rocks and tomatoes at these little black girls. And so he asked Louis to go to Russia to tell the Russians, because Sputnik is not true. And Louis is a very calm man. Just excited, you don't do what anybody does, Louis. But Louis did something that I don't think you should do. Is every day he got up and smoked 2 joints. And after he smoked those 2 joints, Louis was screaming free. Nobody's going to arrest Louis Armstrong. So he got there. And Eisenhower calls his manager, Silver. He says, you got to get Louis Armstrong. So Louis says, I'm not going. So he calls him back, and Louis cursed him down. He said, tell him, mother, I'm not going. And he stopped. Well, Eisenhower realized he had to listen. And it's the first time, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but Eisenhower finally admits to bring in federal troops. See, we get mixed up around this. Whenever there's been disturbance, you have to bring in federal troops. It's no other way. Because they have to bring them in, because they have to bring the federal, because no one else can handle it. I'm not talking about what Trump was doing, but I'm not talking about it. But I mean things like that, if you can. So they bring in the federal troops under supervision. And they brought it to interview, because the states weren't going to do it. So they brought in the federal troops, and Louis sends Eisenhower this note. If you decide to go there, Daddy, take me with you, I'll go with you. Anyway, it had a tremendous influence on Washington, because the next year, Eisenhower desegregated all federal institutions. They've never been desegregated. He desegregated West Point. He desegregated all, and Washington's full of military bases and things like that. He had to. And Executive Order 802. And it had a tremendous influence. The face upon this man. Now, Armstrong also had another influence. So Armstrong came to Washington in 1960, 1970, and who did he come with? He came with Frank Sinatra. Why Frank Sinatra? Well, you have Lord in Prison, which is used to be, I don't know if anyone else knows. Lord in Prison, DC is not a federal prison. So they sent people to prison in Virginia. Now they send them all over the country. And they were sent to Lord. And this includes white prisoners, gangsters, Italian, mobsters, numbers runners, every race you could think of. And this is what they would, and it became a center of. So what happened was they started organizing concerts at Lord. And really, the concerts started in 1960 in Lord were more integrated than the concerts were in Washington, D.C. And who came? And there's a film reel, Walter Cronkite gets on the film and says, today, this man could be any way he wants to. He chose to come to Lord in prison. Who's the man? Oh, Blue Eyes, Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra's son. And Frank Sinatra never played Elvis Fitzgerald. He plays Elvis Fitzgerald there and comes. And it has a tremendous impact on Washington during the beginning of the civil rights days. I'll end with just a few other things. It's only until 1964 when Matthew Lewis comes out with a tune called Income. Anybody ever heard of it? I remember the Income, it became a very good thing. It was headed to Bohemian Catholic. And there, for the first time, the blacks and whites opened it. At the same time, right up the street, All Souls Church, right there, Unitarian Church, which had been the church of John Quincy Adams when he was attorney, or Church of the Abolitionists, right there. Or they brought in the concert, and for the first time, African American Brazilian music was brought there. One of those families, everything, but All Souls Church. She came to Washington as a very young woman. She was much older than we are, but she lived right over here on the southern place, right up there on her SUV. And she was a union organizer, just to catch me young, and just a fighter. and an early environment before black people were involved in environment, because she worked for the American Lung Association. And then she became an organizer in OPEIU, which is the Office of Professional Employees, and like that. And then she founded something called the Provost and Friendship Society, which was it was the American and Russian friendship. So it was trying to keep, during the Cold War, soft and all those things like that. And became and just a great lady. And I remember when she was dying, my wife and I would take her through, and this, she was just that kind of woman. But a unique person. Well, we don't have many like that now because so many been forced out, and it's just difficult. It's difficult. I hate to say it, but one problem we have is that even with jazz and music like that, one thing is that you cannot just feel something. You cannot even just feel jazz. I go to a museum. I see a picture on the wall. What do I know about that picture? I gotta read about it. I go to opera. I look at opera. What in the world would can let me know about opera? Nothing. But I know as much as the next person, but they don't know nothing. So what do? I don't know Italian or French. The first time I went to opera was the Boat Show in Russia. What do? I read, I study, I know. The same thing is true of African American culture. Jazz, I don't understand. Well, maybe not, but read about it, listen to it. It's just true of everything. But Joe Butler was just that kind of person. Everything was inquisitive to her. She just, and she's arguing with you about things like that. And she was one of the few people who really took 3 or 4 things that brought blacks and whites together in DC. Not much. They can tell you it's just not true. One thing was when the Washington football team was winning. Now, when the Washington football team was winning, they said out there right there, my girlfriend at the time, my wife, man, we go out, big parades. When the Capitals won and the Mystics won, you see the parade, there were no black people there. But when this football team won, even though you couldn't go to the game. When Georgetown won the championship, I think in '83, boom! Yes. So you see. So you don't see. But Joe Butler was able to bring things like that together, and that's what we sort of need now, and sort of music. So lastly, it's not just about jazz. Somebody else coming in here? It's not just, it's about music in general, and the culture, and how one expresses and explains music. I maintain that jazz has been probably more than any other music. And even listen now, listen to some of the songs, listen to some of the musicians, it takes places. Even Crazy Man, Kanye West, yeah? He has a record out, you know, it's called Isis, something like that. Yee. And on the thing he says, blood on the roof. He has that in a tune. And what he took it from Strange Fruit. Kendrick Lamar has a great line. It's evident that I am irrelevant. That's a hell of a line. I use it all the time, but it's my old jazz tune. See, so take these things and use them for the struggle. So anyway, I've taken enough time, and thank you for coming in. And please go out and hear some jazz. Somebody here now. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this video from NEXTfest Culture and Conversation series, presented by CapitalBop. There is no way to fully replicate the spirit of those days at NEXTfest, but we are so glad to have this curated archive to share with you. At CapitalBop, our mission is to promote, present, and preserve the sound and soul of DC. To stay connected, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, or find us at CapitalBop.com. Be sure to subscribe to CapitalBop's YouTube channel for more content like this. And again, that's CapitalBop with an A, CapitalBop.com. Maybe I'll catch you at the next show.